Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud for nearly 2 decades, and he thought he had witnessed every conceivable variation of human emotion and experience that could be revealed on a game show stage. He had heard confessions of hidden pasts, stories of wartime sacrifice, testimonies of lifelong regrets, and revelations of love that had endured against impossible odds. But on that overcast September afternoon in 2025, a 58-year-old woman named Margaret Sullivan would share something so quietly devastating, so profoundly heartbreaking in its revelation of a choice made decades ago that had haunted her every day since, that Steve would be unable to hold back his tears, crying openly on stage while the entire studio sat in stunned, reverent silence, witnessing the confession of a woman who had carried unbearable guilt for 36 years and was finally, in what might be her last opportunity, trying to make something right that could never truly be made right. 2 families stood ready to compete, the Anderson family from Illinois and the Sullivan family from Massachusetts. The Sullivan family drew immediate attention because at their center stood Margaret Sullivan, a tired, looking 58-year-old woman with graying brown hair, wary green eyes that held decades of sorrow, and a bearing that suggested someone who had been carrying an enormous weight for so long that it had become part of her physical structure. She wore a simple gray cardigan over a white blouse, moved slowly as if each step required conscious effort, and had an expression of grim determination mixed with barely suppressed anguish. Her family surrounded her with obvious concern, including her husband Tom, who was in his early 60s, her adult son James, who was 34, and her daughter-in-law and 2 teenage grandchildren who seemed confused by their grandmother's obvious distress. During the pre-interview, Margaret had been quiet and withdrawn, answering questions in brief, carefully controlled sentences, and the producers had noticed she seemed to be on the verge of breaking down multiple times. When asked why she wanted to be on the show, she had said something that immediately caught their attention. "I need to tell my son something I should have told him 36 years ago, when he was born. Something about his birth, about choices I made, about a person who should be in his life but isn't. I've carried this secret for 36 years because I was ashamed, because I was afraid, because I told myself it was better for everyone if the truth stayed buried. But I'm 58 years old, I have heart disease, and my doctors say I might not have many more years. And I can't die without telling my son the truth, and without trying, however late and however futile it might be, to make amends for what I did." Margaret's husband Tom, when asked about what Margaret might reveal, had spoken with obvious sadness and support, saying, "Margaret told me 3 weeks ago that she wants to tell James something she's never told him, something about his birth. She told me what it is, and it broke my heart. I've known for years that Margaret carries tremendous guilt about something from before we met, but she never told me the specifics until recently. Now she wants to tell James publicly, and I support her, but I'm also terrified of how he'll react and what this will mean for our family. Some truths, once spoken, change everything." The Sullivan family won their game with quiet efficiency, Margaret contributing one answer in a barely audible voice. As they lined up for fast money, it was immediately clear that Margaret was in no condition to play the rapid-fire round. She was visibly shaking, breathing with difficulty, clearly using all her energy just to remain standing. But when her son James suggested gently that perhaps she should sit this one out, Margaret shook her head with surprising firmness and said, "No. I came here to stand at that podium. I came here to tell you something I should have told you 36 years ago. Please." James had exchanged a worried glance with his father, but ultimately supported his mother's wish, and James went first for fast money, scoring 182 points, which meant Margaret needed only 18 points, easily achievable even under stress. But as Margaret slowly approached the podium, leaning heavily on her husband's arm until he had to step back, Steve noticed that she was already crying, that her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white, and that she looked like someone preparing to confess something unforgivable. He approached her gently and said, "Mrs. Sullivan, are you okay? We can take a moment, or—" But Margaret cut him off, saying in a voice that was thick with tears but carried clearly in the silent studio, "Mr. Harvey, I can't play fast money. I can't pretend to be here for a game. I'm here to tell my son the truth about his birth, about a choice I made when he was born, and about someone I erased from his life because I was selfish and scared and didn't know what else to do. I'm here to confess what I did and to beg for forgiveness I don't deserve." Steve's expression shifted immediately to one of serious concern, and he said quietly, "Mom, whatever you need to say, we're here." The studio fell into that profound silence that happens when everyone understands something significant and painful is about to be spoken. Margaret turned to face her son James, and through her tears she said, "James, I need to tell you about the day you were born, March 15, 1989. You know the story I've always told you, that your biological father was a man I dated briefly who left when he found out I was pregnant, who wanted nothing to do with us, who I never heard from again. That's the story I've told you your entire life. That story is a lie." James's face showed immediate shock and confusion. He said, "Mom, what are you talking about? What's the truth?" Margaret's whole body was shaking now, and she said through sobs, "The truth is that your biological father didn't leave because he wanted to. He didn't abandon us because he didn't care. I made him leave. I forced him out of your life, and I've lied about it for 36 years because I was too ashamed to admit what I did." The gasps from the audience were immediate and audible, and Steve's face showed he was struggling to process what he was hearing. Margaret continued, "Your father's name is Michael Chen. I met him in 1988 when I was 22 and he was 23. We dated for about 6 months, and I got pregnant with you. When I told Michael I was pregnant, he was shocked. We hadn't planned it, but after the initial surprise, he was happy. He wanted to be a father. He wanted us to get married, to raise you together, to be a family. He loved me, and he was excited about you even though the timing wasn't what we'd planned." Margaret paused, struggling to continue, and Steve had moved closer to her, his own eyes filling with tears as he sensed something terrible was coming. Margaret said, "But I wasn't ready. I was 22. I was scared. I was overwhelmed by the idea of being a mother and being married, and having my entire life change so drastically. And Michael, he was Chinese, American, and my parents, your grandparents who you never met, because they died before you were born, they were racist. They made it very clear that they didn't approve of me being with an Asian man, and they absolutely would not accept a biracial grandchild. They told me that if I married Michael and had his baby, they would disown me completely, cut me off financially and emotionally, never speak to me again." James's mouth had dropped open, and he looked stunned. Margaret continued, "I was young and scared and financially dependent on my parents, and I let their racism and their threats control my decision. When I was 5 months pregnant with you, I told Michael that I didn't want to be with him anymore, that I didn't want him to be involved in raising you, that I was going to move back in with my parents, and they were going to help me raise you." Michael was devastated. "He begged me not to do this, begged me to let him be part of your life, told me he would fight for custody rights if I tried to exclude him, and so I did something unforgivable." The studio was absolutely silent, everyone barely breathing as they waited for Margaret to continue. She said, "I got a restraining order against Michael. I lied to a judge and said that Michael had threatened me, that he was dangerous, that I was afraid of him. None of it was true. Michael had never threatened me, never been violent, never given me any reason to fear him. But I lied, and because I was pregnant and appeared vulnerable, the judge granted the restraining order. Michael was legally barred from coming near me or from contacting me, and then, 2 weeks after you were born, I did something even worse." Margaret's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, and she said, "I took you, and I moved to a different state. I moved from California, where Michael knew I was living, to Massachusetts, where I had a distant cousin. I changed my phone number, I didn't leave a forwarding address, and I completely disappeared from Michael's life. He had no way to find me or to find you, and for 36 years, I've kept it that way. I've hidden from Michael, I've made sure he could never locate us, and I've told you your entire life that your father was a deadbeat who abandoned us, when the truth is that I'm the one who did the abandoning. I'm the one who stole you from your father, who deprived him of his son, who deprived you of your father, all because I was afraid of my parents' disapproval and because I was too immature to stand up to their racism. Steve Harvey had tears streaming down his face, and he had to turn away from the stage for a moment to compose himself, but he couldn't stop crying. James looked absolutely shattered, and he said in a voice filled with anguish, "Mom, are you telling me that I have a father who wanted me, who wanted to be part of my life, and you took me away from him and lied to me about it for 36 years?" Margaret nodded, sobbing so hard she could barely speak, and said, "Yes, James. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Michael wanted you. He wanted to be your father. He tried to be your father. And I took that away from both of you because I was weak and scared and listened to my racist parents instead of doing what was right." Margaret looked directly at the camera through her tears and said, "Michael Chen, if you're watching this, if by some chance you see this broadcast, I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm sorry for lying about you, for taking James away from you, for stealing 36 years of your son's life. I can never make that right, can never give you back those years, can never undo the damage I did. But I want you to know that James exists, that he's 34 years old, that he's a good man with a family of his own, and that he deserves to know his father if you're willing to meet him. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but James deserves the chance to know you." Steve had to sit down on the stage floor, unable to stand, crying openly and making no attempt to hide it. The audience was collectively devastated, many people sobbing, others sitting with their hands over their mouths in horror at what they were hearing. James approached his mother, and his face showed a mixture of anger, grief, confusion, and something that might have been compassion. He said, "Mom, why are you telling me this now? Why, after 36 years, are you finally admitting what you did?" Margaret looked at her son and said, "Because I'm dying, James. My heart is failing, and my doctors say I have maybe a year, maybe 2 at most, and I realized I couldn't die without telling you the truth, and without trying to find Michael so you can know your father. It's 36 years too late, and I can never make up for what I stole from both of you, but I had to try." Tom, Margaret's husband, stepped forward and put his arm around her, and he said to James, "Son, I've known your mother for 28 years, and I've always known she carried tremendous guilt about something from before we met. When she finally told me the full story 3 weeks ago, I was heartbroken for you and for Michael Chen, and for everyone who was hurt by what happened. But I also understood that your mother was 22 years old, scared, controlled by racist parents, and she made terrible choices that she's regretted every single day since. That doesn't excuse what she did, but I hope you can understand the context even if you can't forgive it." James stood silently for a long moment, processing everything, and then he said, "Mom, I don't know how to feel about this. I'm angry that you lied to me for 36 years. I'm devastated that I could have had a father who wanted me, but I never got to know him because you took me away from him. But I'm also sad for you, because I can see this has been destroying you, and I understand you were young and controlled by your parents. I don't know if I can forgive you right now, but I don't hate you. And I want to find Michael Chen. I want to know my father if he's willing to meet me." Steve finally stood back up, wiping his face, and he said in a voice thick with emotion, "Mrs. Sullivan, what you just confessed is one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever heard on this stage. You took a child away from his father because of your parents' racism and your own fear. You lied for 36 years about why James's father wasn't in his life. And now, facing death, you're trying to make it right by confessing publicly and hoping to reunite James with his father. I don't know whether to be angry at what you did or moved by your confession and your attempt to make amends. I think I'm both." He turned to the camera and said, "If Michael Chen is watching this, if anyone knows Michael Chen who would be about 59 years old and who had a girlfriend named Margaret Sullivan in California in 1988 to 1989, please contact the show. James Sullivan deserves the chance to meet his father, and Michael Chen deserves to know he has a son. This is more important than any game show. This is about trying to repair something that's been broken for 36 years. The episode that aired became one of the most watched and discussed programs in Family Feud history, with over 115 million viewers. The segment of Margaret's confession went viral within hours, shared millions of times across social media, with people asking whether anyone knew Michael Chen and whether James and his biological father could be reunited. 3 days after the episode aired, a man contacted the show saying he was Michael Chen. After verification of his identity and confirmation of the timeline and details, it was determined that this was indeed James's biological father. Michael had spent 36 years wondering what had happened to Margaret and their son, had tried for years to find them without success, and had eventually built a new life but had never stopped thinking about the child he never got to know. The reunion between James and Michael was arranged by the show and was filmed as a special follow-up episode. When they met for the first time, James was 34 years old and Michael was 59, and both men cried as they embraced. 36 years of separation compressed into that single moment of connection. Michael told James, "I wanted you from the moment I knew you existed. I tried to be your father. I never abandoned you. I was taken from you. And I've thought about you every single day for 36 years, wondering who you became, whether you were okay, whether you ever knew that your father wanted you." Margaret was present for the reunion, and she apologized directly to Michael, saying, "I stole 36 years from you and from James. I lied to you, lied to him, lied to everyone because I was weak and controlled by my parents' racism. I can never give you back those years or make up for what I did, but I'm grateful you're willing to meet James, and I hope you can build some kind of relationship even though it's so late." Michael looked at Margaret for a long moment and then said, "I'm angry at what you did. I'm devastated by the 36 years I lost with my son, but I also understand you were young and scared, and I'm grateful you finally told the truth and made this reunion possible. I can't forgive you yet, but maybe someday I can." James and Michael spent the following months building a relationship, getting to know each other, and trying to make up for lost time. James's children, Michael's grandchildren, met their grandfather for the first time and built connections with him. It wasn't easy. 36 years of separation couldn't be erased, and there was grief and anger mixed with joy. But slowly, carefully, a relationship formed. Margaret lived for 18 more months after her confession, dying in March 2027. In her final months, she said repeatedly that confessing what she had done and facilitating the reunion between James and Michael was the most important thing she had ever done, more important than anything else in her life. She said, "I can't undo the 36 years I stole. I can't give Michael back his son's childhood or give James back the father he should have had. But I gave them the truth, and I gave them the chance to know each other for whatever time remains. That doesn't make up for what I did, but it's something. It's better than dying with the lie still in place." At Margaret's funeral, James gave a eulogy that captured the terrible complexity of his feelings, saying, "My mother did something unforgivable. She took me away from my father because of racism and fear, and she lied about it for 36 years. That's a fact, and it's important to acknowledge it clearly. But my mother also, in her final years, found the courage to tell the truth and to try to make it right. She confessed publicly, knowing she would be judged harshly, knowing it would cost her, because she wanted me to have the chance to know my father. Both things are true. She did terrible wrong, and she tried to make it right. I'm grateful for the 18 months I got to know Michael Chen, my biological father, even though I'm angry about the 36 years I didn't get, and I'm grateful to my mother for finally telling the truth, even though I'm angry it took 36 years. She was flawed and she hurt people, and she carried that guilt until it nearly killed her. But in the end, she chose truth over continued hiding, and that matters." Michael Chen attended Margaret's funeral, saying, "I needed to be here, not for her but for James. I'm still angry at what she did, but I'm also grateful she finally told the truth and made our reunion possible. It's complicated, and it will always be complicated, but I'm grateful for the time I've had with James, however late it came." The story of Margaret Sullivan's confession became a powerful testimony about the long-term costs of lies told to children about their origins, about racism's impact on families, about parental alienation, and about the courage it takes to confess terrible wrongs, even when confession comes very late. It sparked important conversations about how we handle situations where parents lie to children about their other parent, about whether it's ever too late to make amends for serious wrongs, and about the complicated nature of forgiveness when harm is irreversible but remorse is genuine. But perhaps most significantly, Margaret's confession became a reminder that secrets kept to protect ourselves often end up causing far more harm than the truth would have caused, that racism destroys families in ways that echo through generations, and that while confessing wrongs can't undo them, confession is still essential for giving those who were harmed the information they need and the opportunities for connection they deserve. However late those opportunities come, as Margaret said in one of her final interviews, "I can't give back the 36 years I stole from James and Michael. Nothing I do now can repair that loss. But I can give them the truth, and I can give them the rest of their lives to know each other. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's what I have to give, and I'm grateful I found the courage to give it before I died. If anyone else is carrying a similar secret, hiding a child from their other parent, or lying about their origins, please consider telling the truth while there's still time to make some kind of connection possible. The years you steal can never be returned, but the years that remain can still be lived in truth rather than lies.